Good morning, everybody. It is time for the Orthopedic Minute with our friends from DMOS, and joining us in studio is Dr. Ian Lynn, as we're talking about shoulder impingements. And for those people that have had some shoulder problems, Jackie, this is really bothersome. We had this issue a little more than 10 years ago.
Oh, well, let's find out exactly what it is. We do have Dr. Ian Lynn joining us in studio this morning. Thank you so much for being
here. Thanks for having us. Is this the first DMOS Ortho Minute this year?
Yes.
Well, Happy New Year.
As a matter of
Happy
fact,
New Year. First Orthopedic Minute of the year.
You're the lead-off hitter. Okay.
Perfect. Yes. I was like, no, we've done a million of these. No, yes, you're right. 2020. Yes. Here we go. So let's educate our audience. Obviously, it's very common to hear about shoulder pain and things like that. But what exactly does it mean to have an impingement?
Well, impingement syndrome is basically a bursitis. You've heard of people that have bursitis, tendonitis, shoulder sprains. They're kind of all intertwined. But when we're talking about impingement syndrome, we're talking about kind of specifically bursitis of the shoulder. So,
is that a pain? Is that a pinch? Is that a...
Bursa is a little fluid sac that lies between the bones in the shoulder. Here's the one bone called the acromion, and this is called the humeral head.
Okay.
And so the bursa lies between this rotator cuff, which attaches to the humeral head, and between that and this bone.
And the top part, okay.
Yep.
Where does that sac of fluid come from?
You're born with it.
Oh,
so it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
And the purpose of that sac is
to provide frictionless motion between this cuff and that bone above.
Okay, kind of like a little buffer between the two, right?
Yeah, so like when you're moving it, it slides.
Got it.
Friction free.
Okay, perfect.
But the problem is when it gets inflamed. If it gets inflamed, it's no longer friction free, it starts to swell. And that's what causes the pain.
Is it because there's more pressure on both the bones?
Well, since it takes up more space and it's inflamed, when you try to move your arm, it starts to hurt.
Harder to move it then.
Yes,
okay.
yes,
and
yes.
That's where the pain comes in.
Yeah, the key is, one of the keys is the space between this bone and the rotator cuff is really actually pretty small. It's only about 8 millimeters.
All right.
And guess what? The space of the rotator cuff is about 5 millimeters thick. So there's not much space there.
Which is a wee amount.
Yeah, so if the bursa is swollen, it takes up more space and causes pain.
And what would cause that? What would cause that swelling to happen?
Good question. Repetitive activities overhead, you know, electricians, carpenters, but believe it or not, mechanics, sometimes they're working down in an
We hear a
engine.
lot of mechanics, yeah.
Because it doesn't look like it's overhead because it's working below them a lot of times. But guess what? If you look up, it's actually above.
So like if there's an extension of some sort of your shoulder on a regular basis, that can cause some irritation.
Yeah, even people working underneath cars, you know.
Extended period of times it's reaching up over your head, and that just wears on your body and then leads to this type of condition. Now, what can be done if someone is experiencing this kind of pain? And they said, we really have to do something.
Right. Well, the problem with having bursitis is if you have pain.
I was going to say, we have our signs and symptoms full screen up. That was just up. If we can pop that up for another moment. So these are kind of how we know it might be bursitis or impingement.
Pain with overhead activities. A lot of people, when they sleep, they say, oh man, I can't sleep on that shoulder anymore. That's that night pain they're talking about. Usually it's kind of a gradual onset, and people think, like, I'm putting away cups and that bothers me. So it's kind of a dull, achy pain, not usually right up here. A lot of people complain about it down in here.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would that be the case? Why wouldn't it be
more on the bicep?
I call it like a referred pain, because even though the problem is up here, people complain of pain down here.
So you're probably massaging the bottom, the middle of your arm,
you're
and
like
it's not really doing anything.
They're not really
if we can show, so you're saying even though it's happening here, we're feeling it more down here.
Yeah, a lot of times people feel it down here.
Now, a grinding sensation, how would that come into play here?
Well, like if you're lifting up, you can actually hear sometimes a little...
A pop?
Yeah, like it grinds when you're raising your arm up.
That's not old age, that's actually something happening in there?
It actually could be the bursa sac.
Really?
Ooh. Yep.
Never knew that.
Okay.
But now we were talking about treatments too, because what happens is when the shoulder gets inflamed, you don't want to move it, right?
Right.
So all of a sudden it starts to get weaker. And if it gets weaker, what happens is the rotator cuff usually pushes down on the shoulder when you're trying to elevate your arm. So it pulls down on the shoulder so you can raise the arm up. And if it's not doing that, then what happens is the shoulder starts to rise when you're trying to elevate your arm. So you'll see people do this. they'll raise their shoulder first to raise their arm up. What that does is it actually lessens that space even more.
It compresses it.
Yeah, even more, and it irritates that bursa even more. So it's kind of an ongoing thing.
So what are we doing to treat this, or
anti-inflammatories, sometimes oral anti-inflammatories to help reduce the inflammation. Sometimes we do cortisone shots, but a lot of times we actually start with physical therapy. Again, the whole idea is to strengthen that rotator cuff, so again, you can push that humeral head back down, so when you raise that arm up, you have more space.
Now, you say physical therapy, but in order to get to that condition that you have right now, you have been using your arm in that matter. How is the physical therapy going to differ than what you do on a normal basis?
Well, you just teach them how to do it correctly. So usually if you rest it, let that inflammation go down, take away that inflammation, then you can go back to your normal activities.
And how long does it take for the inflammation to go down on a typical basis?
Some people don't go away, and that's the problem.
Okay.
So if we can treat it with anti-inflammatories, the therapy, and maybe a cortisone shot, which is an anti-inflammatory, directly into that space, if you can reduce that inflammation, then you start your therapy and get it all strong again, usually people do fine.
Oh, really?
The problem is if people don't do fine, then what do? Then you have to think about surgical intervention.
You do, okay.
And surgical intervention in our case is mostly arthroscopic. So we put a camera into the shoulder up in here.
Okay, on the screen we show this here.
And we're above the rotator cuff there, and what we do is we take out that bursa sac, which kind of looks like red inflamed tissue.
Okay.
And we take that out, and then we can see the spur, and we knock off the spur in the front of the shoulder. There's a spur that hangs down, and the bigger the spur, the higher incidence of bursitis, because again, that space is less.
Now, if you're taking out the bursa sac that's in there, what's going to be that little buffer?
It's not they're going to be there. We're hoping that by taking out that bursa sac and taking off that spur, we've created enough space for the shoulder, so then those people have to maintain their rotator cuff strength to keep that space open.
So it's enough of a clearance, kind of like a door jamb that gets hung up. So you want to get it so
so it doesn't get stuck.
It doesn't get stuck. Really? Okay.
Yep.
You mentioned using our shoulders correctly. Is there anything we can learn today and our viewers this morning that maybe if we are reaching for something or extending, that where you think, oh, maybe don't overextend, or what are we thinking about so that we're not causing some extra irritation?
I don't think that people should think about like how to extend. It's just maintaining the shoulder strength, especially if you're doing it repetitively. Now, you'd think these guys that do carpentry and they're super strong.
Oh, yeah, swinging the hammers.
Yeah, the problem is when they irritate it. And so then they don't use it, then the strength lessens.
Okay.
So the key is, if it starts to get irritated, to rest it up a little bit early, take some anti-inflammatories before it gets full blown.
Before it gets too far.
And then find the proper way to get it strong.
That's correct.
That's some good advice. I like that.
All right. Now, people are experiencing any kind of pain like this, and they want to get your advice as to what they can do to try to alleviate it. What is the easiest way to get a hold of you guys?
We just call 224-1414, ask for DMOS, and we'll take care of you.
All right. Now, which office are you at?
I'm on the east side. I'm over by Lutheran Hospital. So.
Okay. That works. All right. That's perfect.
More than I ever knew about his shoulder this morning, sir. So I appreciate that
we know
very
a lot
much.
in a very short time.
And we have a definition of what an impingement is, all in full detail.
I was going to say, we're heading into 2020 very knowledgeable this morning, thanks to your help and guidance. So thank you
for
very
having us.
much.
Good to see you, sir.
Nice to see you.
All right, buddy. Good to see you. It is